All right, this week we have Jordan Chiero on the podcast. Jordan is the scouting director for Prep Baseball Report Ohio. He's also the hitting coordinator for the Bo Jackson Dome in Columbus, Ohio, as well. So we talk all about recruiting. Jordan's been the scouting director for PBR Ohio for 9 years. This is his ninth year. So he evaluates hundreds and hundreds of players every single year. So he talks about the evaluation process, what he's looking for, what college coaches are looking for. So if you're a high school baseball player and you want to get recruited to play in college, highly recommend watching this episode. Here we go with Jordan Chiero. All right, we now welcome on the podcast Jordan Chiero. Jordan is currently the scouting director for Prep Baseball Report Ohio. This is his ninth year. And he's also the hitting coordinator for the Bo Jackson Dome up in Columbus, Ohio, as well. So, Jordan, thanks for coming on today.
No problem, man. Excited to be here.
So I don't know if there's too many people, at least in the state of Ohio, who evaluate as many players as you do on a yearly basis. I mean, how many players a year do you think you evaluate and scout?
I mean, the unique part is it's typically we get to see guys develop through the 4 years of high school. So it's hundreds every year. A lot of those are guys as we get to see go through their maturation process, but we'll see hundreds of new guys each year, man. So in our summer this year, we saw over 600 players just at our showcases, and that's not counting going out and watching guys play in the summer, watching guys play in the spring. So the cool part is getting to see the guys develop over 4 years, but you definitely get new guys that pop in every year too.
And I'm sure you guys are, and probably you specifically more than anybody else, is like a highly sought after, trusted resource for college coaches because in a sense, I mean, pretty much every high school player at some point, it seems like at least it'd be smart to at least go to one PBR event, right? Because all college coaches are constantly checking that. But since pretty much all players go to at least one PBR event, like you have a good track record of players. Like you don't really, it's not like if this player commits to the school, it benefits you more versus another player. It's all the same to you. So I'm sure you're a highly sought after, trusted resource to college coaches. What are some of the questions that you get from college coaches? And I say that because the metrics, obviously anybody can look that stuff up, but do they usually dig deeper when they ask you about players, or is it still pretty surface level questions?
I think you get both. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I think the where we provide our value is we don't have any dog in the fight, so to speak. We just want to see these guys get a chance to play at the next level. We don't necessarily care where. We will advise them on what we think is the right fit, but the questions we are more so specifically I get is especially after like the future games, you still get the makeup questions all the time. What's he like to be around? Because you hit it on the head. I mean, they can see the metrics, they can pull up the video. So they have an idea of the skill set. I mean, this is what they do for a living. They evaluate off this all the time. But we get a ton of makeup questions. I get a ton of makeup questions, and then I'm sure we'll get into this when we talk about the evaluation piece. But a lot of when it comes to hitters, their ability to make contact, their approach, how they looked in game, and then for pitchers, did they throw it over the plate? Was it command over control, or was it control over command? Those type of questions that you can't really get just from a video or just from TrackMan metrics. But sometimes they might just see a Twitter video. That happens all the time in the summer where we haven't really gone into anything deep yet from a scouting perspective. We'll have a showcase or a game and we'll post just a Twitter video and I'll get the link and they'll say, love this. What more do you got on them? So it typically depends where they are in the process with that specific player. When the makeup questions come into play, it's typically they're pretty close to making a decision. And then all the way to the actual initial process of maybe just liking a video and anywhere in between.
Do you find that now because of the portal that there's a lot of guys out there that you've seen who've been to PBR events that you've evaluated that they aren't getting the same amount of love that they were getting maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, that same type of player, or is that not the case at all?
I think it's specific cases where I think the portal's impacted the type of player the portal's impacted the most, I should say, is that fringe guy. Now, when I say fringe guy, that could be Power 5 to mid-major or mid-major to prefer walk on to JUCO, D2, D3, whatever fringe you may be, where 3, 4, 5 years ago, we were seeing guys make maybe fringing up a bit, getting on that Power 5 roster, because college coaches were more likely to take on a chance with a guy who had some traits, but might not be all the way there yet. Whereas now with the portal, they don't have to take that chance anymore. They have more of a known commodity with the college player, where they have a track record of what they've done at the collegiate level. So there is less guesswork. Now, your dudes that you can kind of peg right away, like you've been doing this a long time, and a Power 5 guy comes and hits with you in your cage, it just looks, sounds different. Like that guy's still going to get the scholarship he was going to get 4 years ago. But I think what you're really seeing is the trickle down effect, where the level of player, we've always been blessed to have phenomenal Division II, Division III baseball in the state of Ohio, but the level of player that's committing there, I think even Division II and III coaches would agree, is as high as it's ever been. We've always had really good talent at that level in the state, and I think it's just going to continue to load up, because as that fringe kind of trickles down, you're seeing better players commit to quote unquote lower division schools than we have in the past.
Yeah, I think that's one of the unique things about, and I know there's people listening to this podcast all over the country, but I'm in Ohio, you're in Ohio. I think that's one of the unique things about Ohio is the level of competition and in Division III college baseball. It has to be some of the best in the entire country. Just off the top of my head, how many players that you see? It still seems that they don't want to go Division III, Division II. Like they still want to hold out for that Division I. On a regular basis. Like, I'm sure you see that on a regular basis where players don't necessarily want to go that route. What's your advice to them, especially being with the changes that have been going on with the transfer portal and what you just talked about with being a fringe guy at times?
My advice is always, and you're correct, that happens all the time. My advice is go watch it. Like when I started out in the college coaching profession years back at Otterbein University. So I was there for several years. I got to see it firsthand. But yeah, I think players are getting more and more knowledgeable on the subject. But I think you don't know what you don't know. You need to go out and see it. Like go watch Marietta play Denison, or Otterbein play John Carroll. Like Heidelberg play Marietta, whatever, name your pick of all these, Worcester play, all these schools. I mean, there's just flat out ballers on the field, and you don't know it till you see it. Like you're going to see 90-mile-an-hour arms, a couple pro position players. The level of play is just through the roof. And maybe I'm biased because I do this for a living, but I don't think there is a question. I think Ohio has the best Division III baseball in the country. And I think last year we had 4 or 5 teams in the top 25. Baldwin Wallace almost won the entire thing. I mean, you talk about a program that's rolling with Coach Harry and them. They absolutely rake. They almost won the whole thing. So you can go from east, west, north, south, anywhere in the state. You're not further than 20 miles away from an elite Division III college baseball program.
Yeah, and one of the things that you'll see online, or I see online, or people will say to me is like, well, I want to play professional baseball, and like the statistics show if you go play D2 or D3, like your chances drop significantly. And my first reaction is, dude, if you go Division I, your statistics are way down there to begin. Like you can't, let's not act like just because you go Division I, like there's a really good chance you're getting drafted. The majority aren't getting drafted, and you still could if you go somewhere Division III, Division II. And I've seen this before. Because of the portal, those guys will get snagged up in the portal by these Division Is. But I want to talk a little about the evaluation process that you have. And I'm sure it's evolved over the years, being that this is your 9th year doing that. And maybe I think it might be best if we just start out and separate the pitchers and position players. So from a pitching standpoint, which is probably, I don't know, I'm not a pitching guy, but I would assume it's a little bit easier to evaluate a pitcher versus position player. Like, what are you looking for? I know people, of course, they always want to know like the metrics and measurables and things like that. But usually it's a little bit deeper than that. But I don't want to put words in your mouth. Like what exactly are you looking for from a pitching standpoint in the evaluation process?
Yeah, I mean, great question and a loaded question. But I think when you break it down and you look at the way I look at it from a pitching standpoint is just being around it for so long and seeing the type of guys that are getting the scholarships is what's being rewarded. Like, what do college coaches value? And we see hundreds of these guys, but I think when you look at it and what really gets valued is a high ceiling and low risk. So college coaches can sleep at night a lot better with a pitcher that's a low risk guy, meaning there's not as many questions as what he is. They usually have him pegged as either a starter or reliever, and they know what he's going to be, or a guy that has an incredibly high ceiling. And so with those guys, you kind of, when you're evaluating, you're looking at it versus what are they right now? So what's coming out of their hand right now? And then how far away are they from that ceiling, and what do they need to do to get there? So when you look at, let's just start with stuff. I think you can put it almost in two buckets where you talk about the stuff a pitcher has, and then you look at their movement profile, their athleticism, their delivery. So stuff is just kind of what's coming out of the hand right now. So the first thing I would look at is can they throw it over the plate? And then when they do throw it over the plate, is it control, meaning they can just throw strikes out there, or do they have true command? Like, can they move the ball around the plate? Do they know how to set up their breaking ball off their fastball? Because at the next level, you've played at the high level, you play coach in pro ball, you've seen it. Like, if your stuff doesn't play off each other, then those guys are going to mash. So you're looking at, do they have the ability to do that? Can they connect their pitch ability with their data? Like, do they know what type of pitcher they are? And then from a stuff standpoint, the biggest thing we're seeing now with our partnership with TrackMan and being able to dive into all those numbers is you just don't want to be generic. Like, you're looking for outliers, whether that's a specific pitch, whether that's a release height, whether that's an approach angle. When you're outside of the norm of those things and you can command the baseball, you're typically going to get outs. You don't want to be the 5'11" right-handed pitcher that throws 86 with no unique metric to his fastball, because that stuff's going to get hit. But also the metrics are kind of showing us the old school, like you need to be 6'3", like long limbed and have this high velo ceiling. Like, sometimes that's not the case. Whereas if obviously that can still be a good thing, but the guys that are 5'8", 5'9", if they're a little bit unique in what they bring to the table, like, that's going to get outs at the next level as well. So that's from a stuff standpoint. And then what I think the real separator is your physical movement profile. Like, good deliveries, they're going to get to their best stuff with the least amount of effort. Good deliveries are going to hold up better out through a start, meaning they're going to be able to go deeper into outings. Good deliveries are going to hold up best over a year, meaning they're going to get to throw innings, and good deliveries are going to hold up best over a career, meaning they're going to have longevity. So if the arm action is jacked up, then what you do in the weight room might not translate. And that usually means you have some sort of outlying factor with the mobility in your arm. When you have a guy that you say, that guy has a loose arm, that means like he has full stability and mobility within that area that's not being impacted. So I know I'm kind of going off on a tangent there, but how a pitcher moves is incredibly important, because then you can kind of project their stuff moving forward. And guys with the clean arm actions, the good deliveries, they're going to have longer leashes than guys that don't have that, because the guys that don't have to kind of rely more on pure stuff.
Yeah, I'm sure it's hard probably to talk that through, but what would be an example of someone who doesn't have that clean arm action? Like, if someone's listening and is like, do I have a clean arm action or don't I? Is that something I need to work on? Like, is there anything that sticks out to you when you watch players like, that's not a clean arm action right there?
Yeah, I think the timing, like when you talk about being on time, like where your arm is at foot strike, and then the looseness, you're looking for something that's not robotic or stiff, because if your arm's stopping and it's not on time, two red flags mean that you're at a higher injury risk and you're not getting as much out of your body as you could. So, and you're not going to be able to repeat it as often. So you're looking basically for fluidness of a delivery, fluidness of the arm action, cleanliness, and then is it on time? I hope that answered the question. Versus if your arm action's real late, you're talking about guys that have kind of that inverted W, or if it looks like a ton of effort and stiff, you're probably not a guy that would be classified as having clean fluid mechanics.
So if you're a right-handed pitcher, you want to go play college baseball. I mean, is there a certain and I know there's not a specific number like miles per hour, but is there something like you need to be in this range if you want to go play college baseball?
Yeah, I think velocity is definitely a job requirement unless you're an outlier, meaning like unless you have, and even so, you don't see many 82, 85 mile an hour right-handed pitchers throwing at the Division I level, unless it's submariner from a sidearm slot. So yeah, I would say you want to be in the upper 80s for sure. And like I said, there's all different that you go into different buckets. Like guys hit, like we just talked about, guys with the clean arm action, good deliveries, they can project that out. So if you don't have it now, then you need to at least have that physical velocity ceiling where you can get college coaches or scouts can project that out for you. But yeah, if you're not in the mid to upper 80s at any level, really, then you need to have something that's an outlier that you can get out, whether that be arm slot, a really good breaking ball, or plus command. But I'd say if you, and like anything you do in baseball and recruiting and scouting, there's no like one size fits all. But if you were going to just throw it in there, I would say you need to shoot for the mid to upper 80s if you're a right-handed pitcher with the fastball. And then still, even at the next level, you're going to have something else that's going to be able to get you outs.
Do you have any pitchers offhand that you can think of who you just, because this happens to everybody. If it hasn't happened to you, then you haven't been in the game long enough. Is there an example of a pitcher who you missed on, and for what reason? Why?
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, a few guys. There's a guy named Jacob Brustowski. He's a left-handed pitcher that he didn't fall into the bucket of things we're talking about right now. And this was pre-TrackMan, where we could see why he was different. But he was a big physical lefty, like he had that, but he didn't have the fluid arm. He was like 85, 87 in high school, which was good enough to get some Division I feelers out there. But then he ended up pitching at Texas Tech after going to a JUCO and just having elite stuff. But because he worked his butt off and he fixed some of the movement stuff. But yeah, that's one I really didn't get right off the bat. I'm trying to think. There's plenty. Well, you caught me off guard, but yeah, uh,
It
this is
happens to all of us, man. I mean, well, for
yes,
me, it's been more so obviously on the hitting side, but and then you kind of think about it, and I think a part of it too, at least for me, is some of the things that I've overlooked at times is one particular kid who I had when I was with the Orioles, and it just how much he loved the game. Like I didn't take into consideration how much he loved the game, and so like he put so much time in and studied so much and did everything, and then years and years went by, and that just compounded, and now he's one of the top prospects in his new organization. So I think that's something that I missed out on because of that. Not that I had, wasn't like I was a scout and lost my job because of it. I was just a coach. But from a coach, you like, at least I try to project guys and then see, follow up and see where they're at in a few years. But let's talk a little bit about from a hitting standpoint, which is, man, I think it's very, very hard to evaluate a hitter. I mean, obviously the top guys, you're gonna know who they are, and that's easy. But those fringe guys are a little bit tougher, especially if they don't have that physicality yet. But what are you looking for from a hitting standpoint? What are some of the things that maybe you see guys don't do that they should be doing that's within their control when they're working out in front of you? Like, kind of take me through your process.
for sure. It's incredibly difficult. I mean, I think at every level. I mean, it's tough. Like the guys get missed on in the first round that are hitters all the time. Um, I think it starts out with. I think you could talk about the simple things when you're looking at the physical traits. When you put them as a position player as a whole, like pitching is getting so good. Like the pitchers aren't going to get worse. So you better be able to impact the game in several areas other than the bat. I'll get to the bat here in a second, but with the batting averages in college baseball, we're seeing a power input, but I don't know that the batting averages are going to continue to get any better unless they do something to the bats. Like I think pitchers are getting so much better that you need to be able to impact the game with the glove. You need to impact the game with your feet. So I think positionally, when it comes to adding value and what scouts are looking for, you look at the defensive part of the field and you think, all right, what positions impact the game more often than not, than other positions may do. So I think you start with the middle of the field, like with the catcher, shortstop, center field positions. Like they just have more chances to impact the game. So if you can really defend at one of those spots, then you're going to separate yourself immediately. Now, there's not many of those guys. That's why you don't see many elite shortstops, especially in the Midwest, walking around, or elite backstops. So that's a quick way to separate yourself. But strictly from offensively, I think you start with, do you have the prerequisite skills? Like bat speed is a job requirement when it comes to the collegiate level. And then I think aside from, the mental things you talked about, the drive, the work ethic, how much do you want it? Like from a pure physical standpoint, bat speed is what we see as the biggest difference between elite prospects and you can just go on down the line. Like the guys that have bat speed typically get a longer leash and play this game longer. It's very similar to guys that have velo on the mound. And then the tough part is really in the evaluation process is at the high school level, like how often are you seeing a guy face an arm that he's going to face at the next level? Like that doesn't happen very often. Like I think the last stat was 7% of players go on and play college, or 8%. I forget, it was a decimal. And I think there's a lot more talent than that, if that makes sense. I think guys, a lot more than 8% could play. I just think people have a level of division they want to play at, but that's getting beside the point. But let's just say for a round number, 12% of guys could play in college. Like, so how many of those are arms, and how many times are you going to see that matchup? And then inside that matchup, like if you get a hit in high school 4 out of 10 times, you're a star. Like, so then you need to see them produce in that less than 50% of the time. You're going to see them, they're going to produce. So I think when you look at it, you start with the physical traits, and then if they're not having success, so if they lack something you're looking for, so if it's either the contact or the power part of it, like if they can't make contact, then why are they not making contact? When you're evaluating, is it a physical thing? Like if they can't see spin, that's not going to get better at the collegiate level. Like guys that swing and miss or can't pick up a breaking ball, very rarely, if ever, do they go to college and get better at that. So if it's that, that's a big red flag when it comes to evaluating hitters. Or is it an approach deal? Do they just need to have, some guys at the high school level are just never taught to have a good approach? So could it be fixed with what they're looking for, how to work different counts, or is it swing related? Like we use blast. I'm not sure if you use blast with the stuff you do, but we have access to those numbers. So is there a hole in their swing where if they maybe fix that, then they can make contact more often? Those are the type of things you're looking for. Is if a guy swing, that's because for me, that's the biggest red flag of a hitter is swing and miss. Like that doesn't get better at the next level, but is it correctable? And then from a power side, that's usually pretty self-explanatory. Like, is it a swing path issue, or is it just not many guys in high school have tremendous raw power yet? Can you project like them growing into that? So I hope that began to answer your question. One, I think it might be the hardest evaluation piece, maybe other than quarterback in the NFL, one of the hardest evaluation pieces we have in sports, because it is so unpredictable and it is so hard. But I think you start by looking at the physical tools, and then you look at their production in game and try to draw conclusions on if they're lacking in one area. Is it something that is you're able to fix before they get to the collegiate level, or is it something that is just not going to be able to come together for them?
First of all, that was very, very well said. I agree with everything you said right there. I just have a follow up. I had Kyle Truin on the podcast. I don't know, maybe it was a couple of months ago, who's up at Miami, Ohio. They're hitting coach up there. And one of the things that he had said, he's like, man, if I could have 9 hitters in the lineup and they were all left-handed, I would be very happy. Is that something that you see? Because that's something that I've really noticed over the past 6 months, 10 months. And maybe that's because I just wasn't paying attention before, but how many coaches prefer left-handed hitters over right-handed hitters?
Oh yeah, that's a huge thing. Left-handed hitters are gold, man, because one, I mean, it's this as simplistic as this is, they're closer to first base, so they're going to get down the line better. But more in depth wise, there aren't as many of them. So if you find good ones, it's hard, like anything in life, but in scouting and recruiting, like the harder it is to find something, the more valuable it is. So there's less of them. And then most pitchers are right-handed. So you come in with a added advantage of being down the line quicker, and with the added advantage of most of the time you're going to be facing the opposite handed pitcher, which some people don't care about, but a large percentage of the baseball community does. And maybe that's just me being clouded a little bit, but I remember when I was right-handed, unfortunately, but when a left-handed pitcher came up, I always felt a lot more comfortable. So I think all those come into, yeah, I don't think there's any question that left-handed hitters are more valuable than right-handed hitters. Unfortunate for us right-handed hitters, but I think it's the world we live in.
Is that I mean, have they done like research studies on that? Like, have they gone back through? Because that, and this is something I should ask Kyle on the podcast. Maybe I'll send him an email and ask again. But my mind goes to like, is that actually backed up by something other than just like something subjective?
If there is a study, I don't know about it. But I would just tell you from the recruiting cycle, maybe it is subjective. I'll tell you, college coaches definitely believe it, because if you look at, like you said, what you've noticed in the past 6 months, but what I've seen over the past several years is left-handed hitting infielders, especially, or catchers, they come off the board first. Like they're gonna be the ones that come off the board first. And I'm sure maybe there is, you might have just given me a homework assignment. I'm gonna go look into that afterwards. But
That's awesome. What about corner guys, corner players, corner outfielders? From what I've seen, those are usually the last players to go. And again, I want to ask you questions like this because I know these are, parents and players are going to be listening to this, and there's going to be some corner players who are listening to this too. And so I think at times maybe it's a little bit frustrating for them. They don't know. And I think earlier you had mentioned how up the middle players, they're going to go first. They have more versatility at the next level. But just if you don't mind explaining like why corner players sometimes are the last ones to go.
for sure. One, if you're a corner guy listening to this, trust me, your time will come. It's typically that the middle guys come off the board first. Not that corner guys don't come off the board, because I mean, there's more corner positions than there are middle positions, and when you're talking infield and outfield. But the reason being is typically, I mean, if we're just being honest, typically the better defender is playing up the middle. Like, I don't know how many high school shortstops there are out there that want to their coach and be like, you know what, I prefer to play third base. Like, that doesn't happen very often. So typically the simple answer is that the better pure defender plays up the middle. And there's less guys that, I think one of the most rare things in Ohio that I can point to over the past several years of doing this, the most rare type of prospects are a slam dunk. You look at that guy and say, yeah, he can play shortstop at the collegiate level. Like, there's just not many of them. So like we said earlier, the rarer type of a prospect you are, the more college coaches are going to want that. But I think it's more of timing necessarily than anything. They'll take care of the middle first. And then when you go to the corners, the ball, you don't have as much impact on the game defensively. Like, the ball's not hit to you as much. And that's just data. It's backed up by that. And then typically corner guys are power guys, which is harder to evaluate when we talked about from when you're evaluating hitters. Usually the bigger, stronger hitters, understanding if that's going to actually translate to the next level is even more difficult than just the pure hit tool, because power is one of the toughest things to project out. When is it going to happen? Is it going to be able to happen at that level? So if you're a guy that you do yourself a big favor by hitting for a higher average, or if you're a high contact guy that also has a power ceiling, like, that's going to be something that's going to put you ahead of the curve. But one, to kind of wrap up, your time's going to come. Like, college coaches go through the middle, then they go to the corners, because you got to have a third baseman, first baseman, left fielder, right fielder in the game. You got to play with those guys. But also it's just from a pure defensive standpoint, and the power tool being harder to project at the next level.
One of the things that I hear from a lot of different players that I even just work with in Cincinnati, just from a hitting standpoint, is, sometimes like college coaches will call them and then they don't hear anything from it at all. Kind of just goes dead. I know this, and this happens all the time. And I think from, just talking with college coaches, I think a lot of times that they're just trying to just gauge interest, see, what the players like, see if they connect at all. Um, what should players be like expecting if they get a phone call from a coach? What does that mean? What does it mean if a coach is on Twitter liking their tweets? Like, I think these types of questions are what I get, and I don't think there's anybody better to answer them than you.
For sure. I appreciate that. I think it's this parallel is you can draw a strict parallel, I think, to it's almost like the dating world, man. Like if someone's interested in you to the point where they want to create a relationship, like you're going to know it. Like it's going to be very obvious. So I think college coaches want to create a relationship with at the beginning with players that they potentially can see themselves recruiting. So when they start the feeler out process of liking a tweet, talking to your high school coach, talking to your summer coach, following you on Twitter, that's the initial process. Kind of like, for lack of a better term, they're swiping right. That doesn't mean like they want to be in the relationship yet, but there's something about you that is intriguing to the point where they're not ready to say no yet. Like they want to at least dig into it, but they're doing that with a lot of players because it's their job. Like that's how they feed their family. They're trying to get the best possible player into their program. So I think that kind of things, when you're talking about, they're good things. That means there's an interest level. There's a difference between getting followed on Twitter versus a camp invite via email. Like that means you're further along the prospects. Like not everybody's getting followed on Twitter, but I think when the phone conversations start, that's when it becomes serious. Like this could happen, but they'll also have opening phone calls just to create that initial relationship. If they're not sold on it yet. And if you're not hearing from a coach regularly, I wouldn't say that doesn't mean it's the end of the world, but if you're a target recruit and they want you, like typically it's going to be pretty obvious on your end.
Why do you think that, and this is something that I've seen now, not even just in baseball, but I've seen it actually even in softball too. And this is building off of what we're just talking about. I've heard of a lot of college coaches tell kids or tell maybe the travel coach, yeah, we're going to offer them. We'll call them later this week or whatever. And then it never happens. Is that usually because something better happens or something better comes up? Like why do coaches do that?
I mean, I think there's unique cases for everybody. Like I said, I don't think there's one exact answer, but I would tell you that typically what that means is if they don't, that means they found something better. Or if they do tell you that, that means they want to keep you interested and they might be trying to get an answer from another player and they want to make sure that you're not committing anywhere because you could be their second choice. But if they are saying they're going to offer you and that never happens, they either change their mind or their number one option. You weren't their number one option going into it. And I think at least in Ohio, I haven't heard of that a ton, but I have heard of that. I've seen it on Twitter a ton. I've seen a lot of coaches not happy about it on social media. I think I haven't seen that a ton from college coaches in Ohio. I could be wrong or naive to it. So hopefully not too many Ohio prospects are going through that. But if they do, that just simply means they either changed their mind or their number one choice came through.
Yeah, I haven't. Same here. I haven't heard that necessarily from any college coaches in Ohio. It's actually all been outside of the state of Ohio now that you say that, but I have heard it several times. But so I that's something I didn't think of, what you just said right there about how they may not want you to commit somewhere else and kind of just making sure that you stay close if they're number one choice. I think you're probably 100% right there. I didn't even think of that. When you are helping players, because I'm sure you build relationships with players too, and you work with hitters currently too, and you see certain players go on to college and maybe it doesn't work out at that school. What are some reasons or that kids should be considering when choosing the right college based upon what you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, that's a phenomenal question.
Thank you.
I think that's one of the biggest mistakes, and I think it starts with the beginning of the process. Is typically when that happens is you let outside factors other than what truly matters to you about your college experience dictate where you went. I mean, sometimes it just doesn't work out, like sometimes like it's an inexact science. The coach that was recruiting you thought you were going to be a superstar for them. And whether it's talent wise, you had a hard time adjusting at the next level, or coaching changes, whatever it may be. Like sometimes life just happens, but in reality, more often than not, it's typically being unprepared in the process and just basically making a decision on level or glitz and glam and not truly what matters to you. So my advice to all these guys, and hopefully they get it right the first time, but when they're coming out of the portal, because we have those conversations too, it's you need to really have a list of things that truly matter to you in the process, kind of like your hierarchy of values when picking a college program. And that could be different for everybody. There's no right answer. It could be playing time. It could be as simple as like, if gear really matters to you and you want to go to school like that has cool gear, good for you. Like everybody's a little different, but I think not being fully prepared for an opportunity when it comes and then being caught off guard and not having done your research on the hierarchy of values to you in your college program is typically what happens. And they choose schools for the wrong reasons. Typically what it is it's their best offer and they're willing to overlook maybe the development plan or the type of offense they're getting into, or how if they're a pitcher, how the pitching staff develops arms, and they choose what might be perceived as the better offer in the moment versus what truly matters to them in the long run.
Love that. It's great stuff. Great stuff. We got a few more questions for you. So what's the timeline for recruiting? Like here's where I think it's at. Let me know if it's wrong. So right now it's August 1st of heading into your junior year. That's when Division I coaches can call you. I believe it's sometime mid-June for Division II coaches heading into your junior year. So usually the top players are getting those phone calls right away, and they're committing that fall of their junior year at some point. And then slowly but surely the mid majors will finish out by the end of their junior year. And then heading into their senior year, there'll be a couple of mid-major Division I's will offer or still be recruiting, but then the D2, D3, and NAIA and JUCO will recruit from then on till the graduating senior year. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's pretty darn close. That's pretty darn close. Now I think the rule change is gonna, I think, this is our first year with the new rule. So I think it's going to be impacted. But if you just look at the data like right now, so let's go with 2025s. Right now, and we might have missed a few, I don't think so, but from our database, we have 37 commits in Ohio right now, 2025s. And in the 2023 class, so freshmen in college right now, we had over 500 players commit to the collegiate level. So, and that's the same in 2022. And typically we have right around, if history repeats itself, we have right around 100 players, 90 to 100 that commit to Division I schools out of the state of Ohio, depending on the year. So right now, 37 guys, if you do the quick math, that means over 450 guys that aren't committed right now are going to play in college, and somewhere between 60-ish guys that aren't Division I commits will end up committing to Division I. Now, like I said, I don't know if the new rule will change, because I think now that Division I's have to recruit year by year, I think they'll have so much info on these guys that when August 1st comes, like they're going to be firing away. And I think you'll see a deeper pool of guys committing right away, because the players will have more information. The college coaches have more information versus when you're getting recruited as a freshman or eighth grader, even as we used to have. So I think other than that, I think you're spot on with the assessment. But for parents and players watching this, like I think that's one of the biggest points I try to get through is like, relax when August 1st comes around and you're not talked to and you're not hearing from, because as you pointed out, the only level really right off the bat that is recruiting you is Division I. And even now, like if let's just say an even number of 100, only 37% of our 2025 class that will be Division I guys are committed right now for whatever reason that might be. So even the Division I dream isn't gone if you haven't heard from anybody on August 1st. And then in reality, Division twos, threes, JUCOs, NAIAs, like they're going to come around in the timeline you said. So there's no reason to hit the panic button. But yeah, I think that's a pretty spot on assessment. Is you're going to the Division ones, the Power Fives, and mid majors, they'll have their guys right off the bat. That'll float throughout the summer, early fall, and then around Christmas, where the other in the winter time, that's when the other schools will come into play into your junior year, and then go from there. But yeah, there's the big thing is there's no rush, relax. Like there's going to be plenty of time. And now with the portal, even like Division I schools are going to be looking for guys later on into sometimes even into the summer where they wouldn't have had to in the past.
I'm glad you brought that up. So I was talking to a Division I coach recently, and one of the things that he told me was he's like, I don't think as many high school players are leveraging the portal the way they should be. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he goes, well, here's the thing. He's like, we're a mid-major Division I college. Okay. And so he said, usually what ends up happening at the end of the season, like he was referring to the end of last season, guys, after our season's over, some guys that we didn't expect to go in the portal and leave on our team end up going in the portal and leaving. And I'm like, all right, so what does that mean? And can't you just go in the portal and get somebody else? And he's like, yeah, but we're a mid-major Division I. So we're not going to go in the portal and get another, if we go in the portal and get another mid-major Division I player, it's because they weren't good enough normally to play at that other mid-major Division I school. Because if they were really good and had really good numbers, now they're going to the Power Five. So I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. He goes, so honestly, what I would rather do is I'd rather take a chance on a high school kid then. Right. I'd rather take a chance on a kid who's maybe overlooked in high school versus some kid who just sat the bench at some Division I school. And so to your point, he was saying, he's like, I think kids they should be a lot more patient, because there's usually money that usually opens up because college coaches start to panic, especially at that mid-major level, because they don't want to just give money to, or just get somebody on their roster who didn't play at another school.
Yeah, I mean that's a great point. I mean that happens all the time. Like colleges lose guys at the portal they didn't know was going to happen, and like you said, unless it's a big trickle down, like whether you're like high level Power Five to mid major, like you hit on the head. You're typically it doesn't work out because they didn't get on the field. I mean, there's other reasons why guys get in the transfer portal for sure, but that's, I would say, the majority of the reason why it happens. So are you really going to recruit a guy that wasn't good enough to play for a team that have to go beat, like, or would you rather restock and go through? And I think that will end up happening more and more. I think as high school guys are getting more educated on the topic and realizing that that they have more time than they think. But it's tough as a high school kid. Like, I get it. Like, do you really want to wait until like you got to be on campus in 2 months, or do you want to take an opportunity that you already have and has presented itself there? So I get both sides of that. Like, I think there's a lot of, when that does happen to college coaches, I'm sure they wish there was a talent pool still out there. And for high school guys, like, I just think it's tough to unless you really are you really willing to take a risk to wait that long. But if you are, there's going to be opportunities.
Last question for you. It's about PBR events. So how many events, this is something, again, it's another question I'll get is, how many events should my kid go to? When should they go? Are there specific events that are better than others? I don't, again, for me, like one of the things that I've seen is I think that the top prospect, what you guys have up at Prasco Park, I think that's usually loaded with college coaches, and that's obviously invite only, but that's one of the ones that sticks out to me. But what would be your guidance or advice for people out there who have that question?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think it all starts out to like what financially makes sense for you. Like, you don't need to go to 100 showcases. I think a really good plan would be, we have a scout day, what we call them, with specific organizations in the winter. So all the guys you train down in Cincinnati, we have one with Midland, CBC, the Flames, all the Legends baseball, like all those guys. We'll have that. So if your team's having a scout day, I think that's a pretty good idea to go to in the winter. More so that you're trying to get in the winter, nobody's getting, or I shouldn't say nobody. It's rare that you're going to earn a scholarship from a winter showcase, just because a big part of this evaluation piece is obviously the game, and we live in Ohio, so you're not playing a game in a showcase. So, but what you're trying to do is you're trying to get your name on a list for a college coach to go out and see in the spring. I call it the winter showcase. I call them resume builders. It's not the job interview. You're trying to get your foot in the door. That way, when the spring comes around, that your name's on a list where you can go out and be seen, and you're trying to show improvements and have a kind of a running tally of how you're improving over the past few years. So I would say if you can and it financially makes sense, we have open ones 2, 3 a year in the north, the central, and the south for guys that we maybe can't make their date. Maybe they're basketball players and they're or something on that day. So we have open ones too. But if you can get to one in the winter, great. If not, the summer where we do play games, I think has an incredible value. So my advice is always one in the winter, one in the summer. And if it doesn't make sense financially to do both, I would lean towards doing one in the summer because we do all the stuff we do. From a measurable standpoint. So we'll measure all the physical traits you have, and then we'll play in a game after. If you get in a top prospect game, that's a phenomenal one to go to. That's kind of guys listening to this in high school might be too young, but for me and you, it's our Catalina wine mixer for a Step Brothers reference. So yeah, if you can get to that one, great. And every event we have is kind of a, for lack of a better term, an identifier for that. So you don't have to go to 1,000 events to get invited to that. If we see a guy that's good enough to go to that, they're going to go. But that's where we collect the top talent in Ohio, and then we typically it's well represented from high school coaches. But we have plenty of options, and they're all the same when it comes to what we actually do there. You're going to have the same showcase. We'll play games afterwards, the same measurables. They all provide kind of the exact same deliverables for a high school player and what they need to put on their resume to get it recruited. But yeah, the top prospect games from a hospitality standpoint, I mean, if you haven't been to Prasco Park, it's worth just going there for the experience, but then from a college coaching standpoint as well.
Awesome. Jordan, I appreciate you coming on. If somebody wants to like learn more about what you do, maybe they're interested in PBR, like where should they go? Where should they follow you? Should they go to a website?
Head to the website, and if you have any questions, you can email me directly. It's Chiero, my last name, at prepbaseballreport.com. Pretty simple. Shoot me an email. We'll get back to you if you have any questions. But yeah, our website's full of everything. And then if you follow us on social media, we have a great social media team that's pumping out stuff about players and what we're doing constantly. So either on Twitter, Instagram, we're easy to find there. So all those are good avenues. But if you have any specific recruiting questions, that's why I do this. That's the coolest part about my job. So make sure you reach out to me via email, and we'll always get back to you.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
No problem, man. Thanks for having me on.